Welcome everyone to the first meeting of the fall season of the Sacramento Faust branch of the Anthroposophical Society in America. My name is Ronald Coach, and on behalf of the branch coordinating committee, I would like to thank you all for joining our meeting. We have 76, not 77 people on the Zoom meeting. We hope that you are safe and well and successfully dealing with the challenges of these extraordinary times. The confluence of the pandemic restrictions and disruptions, the wildfires here in California and on the West Coast, the resulting air pollution, the hot weather, and turmoil in the national political scene call upon us to have a Michaelic courage and a faith in the working of the spiritual world. Sandra will read a verse by Rudolf Steiner appropriate to these times.
Technology and art, their bearing on modern culture. Everybody is obliged to undergo the battle. In its effects, it is experienced by everybody. There would be no greater fallacy than to say we must rebel against what technical science has brought to us in modern life. We must protect ourselves from Ahriman. We must withdraw from this modern life. In a certain respect, such an attitude would be an indication of spiritual cowardice. The real remedy lies not in allowing the forces of the soul to weaken and to withdraw from modern life, but in so strengthening these forces that its pandemonium can be endured. World karma demands a courageous attitude to modern life, and that is why genuine spiritual science calls at the very outset for effort, really strenuous effort on the part of the human soul.
Thank you, Sandra. So fortunately, we are entering the season of the Archangel Michael, the time spirit of our age. So our presenter this evening is Andrew Linnell. Andrew grew up in Amherst, Massachusetts. His father was a professor of astronomy. When Andrew was halfway through high school, the family moved to East Lansing, Michigan. Andrew attended the University of Michigan, where he found that he excelled in the new field of computer science. He got a BSE, Bachelor of Science in Engineering, in 1972 and a master's degree in the same subject in 1973. Andrew was interested in telekinesis and the powers of the mind. And in 1976, he was introduced to anthroposophy by a girlfriend. Andrew's scientific training caused him to rebel against anthroposophy. He ridiculed it until he found a copy of Rudolf Steiner's The True Nature of the Second Coming, a book on a bookshelf. Since then, he has cultivated a strong interest in Christology and in the ancient mysteries. Andrew worked in the computer industry for 42 years. He was chief technical officer at Omega Band in Austin, Texas, and also worked at Digital Equipment Corporation, Wang Labs, IBM, and Compaq Computers. In 2013, Andrew founded Mystech, which is spelled M-Y-S, capital T-E-C-H. According to Andrew, Mystech stands for the mysteries of technology. It could also stand for the misuse of technology. Mystech sees among its goals the cultivation of a mechanical occultism that is good for human evolution. It also seeks to include the mysteries of technology in spiritual science. helping to overcome fear and to build the strength of soul to face Ahriman in our times. Andrew leads several study groups based on Mystech and has published 3 study group guidebooks. Mystech publishes a journal entitled Mystech, where articles by Andrew appear. He lectures frequently on the role of technology in human evolution and on the Christian mysteries. He manages several websites and Facebook pages. Andrew is president of the Boston branch of the Anthroposophical Society and a member of the School of Spiritual Science. Andrew is the father of 3 and has written 2 children's books, plus an art history book, The Hidden Heretic of the Renaissance, Leonardo. He lives in Hudson, Massachusetts, and enjoys gardening, hiking, skiing, and swimming. We are very happy to have Andrew speak to us tonight. Our world and our daily lives are increasingly dependent on technology. Andrew affirms that we can learn to use technology in a spiritually healthy way without fear and with a clear understanding of what we are doing. His talk tonight is entitled Entering Subnature for Michael. So please, Andrew, we turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Ronald. To get started, I want to read a short poem by Nietzsche called Ecce Homo to set a tone for this Michaelmas address. It goes like this. Yes, I know where from I hail. Ever hungry like the flame, I glow and consume myself. Light becomes all I can catch, coal all that I leave behind. There's no doubt a flame I am. We are at the autumnal equinox with fires in our forests, and we are about to enter the season of Michael. In fitting with this season, I'd like to begin with a question. Who is like God? This question is a cosmic word similar to the Delphinic inscription, know yourself, the so-called riddle of mankind. It might sound odd, but the name of the archangel for the autumn is who is like God. You know this question as the name Michael, or Michael, or perhaps Mikey. Michael is one of 4 archangels who have ruled in sequence each of the 4 seasons. Plus, he is one of 7 archangels who have ruled in sequence each of the 7 periods that comprise the time of transit for the sun to pass through a zodiac sign. This passage takes 2,160 years, and that means about 310 years per archangel rule. During these 310 years, each operates as a time spirit. The actual time spirits are the next higher level known as archai. The archai, archangels, and archai, archangels, and angels comprise the 3rd heavenly hierarchy. Eventually, every being of the hierarchies will graduate to its next level when it has finished its divine purpose and goal. Since the 15th century, spiritual beings have been advancing when ready. This is the case with Michael, who began his turn as the time spirit in 1879. When his turn as time spirit concludes in about 2200, he will not return to the level of archangel, but will remain as an archai, or at the archai level. Here we have another riddle. Who will take Michael's place in the rank of archangel? Who takes his place as the seasonal archangel, and who takes his place as the time spirit in each one of the passages through the zodiac. With each new archangel in each of these positions, how will that affect life as we've known it? Each archangel has a gesture. Michael is known to be taciturn. He speaks through his countenance, offering approval or not for deeds. His approval comes with support, but there are no pre-approvals. He will not impact our free will. After Michael has advanced, who will fight the dragon? Today, Michael stands upon the dragon, the Ahrimanic. Who will stand upon the dragon after 2200? To help us answer such riddles, let's look a bit closer at ancient as well as relatively recent changes in the spiritual world. First, I'm going to show you a diagram. Okay, so this is a slide showing the astral realm, etheric, physical, and subphysical. And what I wanted to show you is what the plan was for humanity when we were still early on, let's say, in Eden. And the plan was that we would descend and just barely touch the physical, really not ever taking on physical bodies. But because of Lucifer and the successful temptation, you can see the path was altered. The path which would lead us not only through the physical, but to touch into the sub-physical. And this is the theme of what we'll be talking about then tonight. Anthroposophy and the mission of Michael is described in a letter called Michael's Task in the Sphere of Ahriman. He describes how mankind will need to successfully navigate this dangerous path through Ahriman's realm. During our evolution, we have had direct access to a myriad of spiritual beings. But as we evolve towards freedom, our access has changed from direct to inspirational to imaginative access to an experience of God at certain times in their temple to no access. You see, in 1250, the spiritual world closed its doors to all people, including initiates. Humanity could only experience through their physical senses the wrought works of the gods. Former initiates had to rely on their memories, their etheric bodies for their work during these times. Before these doors closed in 1250, however, preparations were being made. We can give examples looking back around the year 869 to a meeting in spirit that occurred. Present were the recently deceased Harun al-Rashid and his wise counselor. They had presided over the world's cultural center of the 9th century, Baghdad. Also present were the knights of King Arthur's, who had carried the stream of the pre-Christian cosmic Christ into Europe. In addition, and importantly, were Aristotle and Alexander, who were present, having just had an unknown, it's not recorded in history, unsubstantial incarnation. All of these were initiates. Their intention was to agree and coordinate on what to do in their next incarnations. But an agreement was not to be reached. Two paths emerge. One path would lead to Averroes, Francis Bacon, and Amos Comenius. The other path convened a spiritual conference that completed just before 1250. Platonists from the school of Shatra, such as Bernardus Silvestris and Alanus ab Insulis, had just passed through the gate of death. They met with the Aristotelians who were about to incarnate, individuals who would be Thomas Aquinas, Meister Eckhart, and Agrippa of Nettelsheim. Eckhart's words speak for this transition. And here's his quote: "God has died so that I also die away toward the world and become a God," end quote. They forged a strategy for the end of the 20th century that intended for both groups to overlap their incarnations, both groups being the Platonists and the Aristotelians, and to collaborate for the next stage of Christianity. Just to give you a picture of what was going on around the year 1250, in 1208, the Albigensian Crusade began. This 20-year military campaign initiated by Pope Innocent III was the genocide of the Cathars in southern France. Its unspeakable cruelty was committed by a mercenary army against Christians who never had an army out of a belief in love and nonviolence, but they were considered heretics, and so they were exterminated. Rosicrucians may have had their roots here with the Cathars. In 1234, the Dominican monks were asked to become the inquisitors in order to root out all remaining Cathars and their sympathizers. Oddly, Thomas Aquinas and Albertus Magnus, his teacher, were Dominican monks. Philip, who became king of France in 1285 and ruled over the extermination of the Knights Templars, starting in 1307 and lasting till 1313. Philip would die, according to legend, when the lead Templar Knights declared so, and he died within the year in 1314. This would also coincide with a time when Dante was writing the Divine Comedy. It's very important and not too well spoken of in history books, but in 1258, this same Baghdad of Harun al-Rashid, well, of course, he was no longer there in 1258, but it was sacked, and its remarkable centers of learning, such as Gandhi Shapur, were destroyed by a Christian army. Yes, Christian. Mongols from the east under Hulagu. They were Nestorian Christians. And if you don't know about Nestorian Christianity, after this talk, I invite you to look it up. Fascinating history here. Incidentally, the Mongol Empire had mandated religious tolerance. Some of its armies converted to Islam, some to Nestorian Christianity, and some remained pagan. As an aside, our founding fathers of America were inspired by this concept of religious tolerance from Genghis Khan's empire and wrote it into our American Constitution. That is the concept of the separation of church and state. I have mentioned the great change that began in the 15th century. Archangels had until then been the administrators of the human blood. They now began to teach the angels to take over this job so that they could move on to administer the system of nerves and senses. At that time, the seraphim, cherubim, and thrones were carrying over the cosmic intelligence into that member of man's organization that we call the system of nerves and senses, or the head organization, for the archangels to administer. So after this pre-1250 spiritual conference, Michael then called for a school to prepare for his turn as the time spirit. This Michael school from the 15th to the 18th century worked at the level of inspiration and imagination. The goals of the coming centuries were set. Then from 1841 to 1879, a great battle took place in the spiritual world, and a class of angels were cast down into human consciousness. The victory belonged to Michael and his forces. The losers, one might quip, were us, the humans, who now had to deal with these laggard angels in our consciousness. To balance this, starting in 1880, a new set of beings got access to human consciousness. These are called the Vulcan beings. They were the last here during the Atlantean epoch, and it was their oracle that was betrayed. This led to new forms of black magic that caused the divine beings to destroy Atlantis with a deluge. When these laggard angels, who had previously been used to block access to the spiritual world, when they were now removed, Kali Yuga could be brought to an end in 1899. 33 years later, the appearance of Christ in the etheric could begin. Then in 1998, with the third cycle of 666, an influence from Sorat, Christ's adversary from the sun, could be brought as a new impulse to human beings. Some years from now, we'll likely be able to distinguish what that impulse was. Many of us have ideas on that today. But many of us have confused Sorat with Ahriman. These are not the same. It would be incorrect to think of 1998 as a possible birth date for the body that will house Ahriman's incarnation, although it is possible. But Sorat's impulse will certainly make things easier for Ahriman, whose incarnation I, for one, put when Arithiel will become the time spirit after Michael. What can be said to the responsible? What can be said to be responsible for our current situation with its mounting fears? We have 5G, we have artificial intelligence, deep state, climate change, global warming, fires in the West and Australia, hurricanes in the Atlantic, pandemics affecting human contact, even our educational systems. People are dividing into camps, especially political camps. Nationalism, racism, genderism, exploitation, greed, fears, and more fears. And it will only get worse. You heard about pandemic. So I will repeat this. Everybody is obliged to undergo the battle. And you've heard that. So I will just remind us that we are all going through a pandemic and a pandemonium. And it is for our strengthened forces to endure this. And we have to develop a courageous attitude. So we can ask, why is this happening? Perhaps seeing current events through the eyes of Michael will help. Michael sees the great events in Earth's history taking place, both those of the past as well as those of the future. Long ago, when the spiritual world was concerned with its own battles and needs, it was Michael who brought their attention to a group of poor beings who were over, so to speak, huddled in a corner, humanity. He could foresee that it would be us who would take the human stage on Earth. It was he, the chief steward of the cosmic intelligence, who took on the loving concern for us. What is this cosmic intelligence? We can begin to grasp this when we come to realize that between death and a new birth, we are without physical and etheric bodies. These are replaced by angels and archangels as we sojourn the cosmic realms. This starry structure serves as our blueprint for our coming life, incorporating in cosmic intelligence within us. During our evolution, Michael let this cosmic intelligence slip away from him so as to endow humanity with its potential. Here's a quote from Steiner. Michael foresaw how man, in progressing more and more towards his own individual use of intelligence, must meet with these Ahrimanic beings, and how by uniting with them, he might then succumb to them. That's from the experience of Michael in the course of his cosmic mission, a letter to the members. He knew the danger of doing this because he knew Ahriman would be there to take this intelligence into his own realm, where he could modify it to be materialistic, for example, into artificial intelligence. Much of the cosmic intelligence has already fallen into Ahriman's realm, and Michael cannot go down into Ahriman's realm to retrieve it. Who can? We can. In fact, only humanity can go there and return. We are his special forces, armed only with our free will and motivated by our love. We can take this cosmic intelligence into ourselves so that we can carry it back to its rightful realm. But by the time we free this captive intelligence and return it to Michael, he will no longer be an archangel. He will be a member of the archive, making our task to return it all that more difficult. You might ask, how does Michael expect me to go up against Ahriman alone? I mean, not only is Ahriman far more intelligent than I am, but his angelic hordes that Michael pushed out of the heavens are now running rampant in my consciousness and yours. On top of that, you and I have an Ahrimanic double hiding out in our body, constantly urging us to act like an animal or a machine. Doesn't it seem like the deck is stacked against us? For us to enter Ahriman's realm, well, is it not like being cannon fodder? Recall those Vulcan beings I mentioned? They have a score to settle. You see, back in Atlantean times, none of the oracles were betrayed except for one, theirs. And it led to the black magic that eventually caused the destruction of Atlantis. They want to redeem this. Plus, these Vulcan beings have their own evolution to complete. And the conditions now on Earth are just what they need to finish up. They can only do this with our cooperation. What? Our cooperation? Aren't we already busy enough? Now we're being asked to listen to and work with a bunch of strangers? Doesn't it appear that Michael's expectations are a bit extreme? Maybe we can just ignore these Vulcans and let them fend for themselves. Anticipating this, Steiner remarked that if we ignore these nasty Vulcans, they will cause strife after strife, upheaval after upheaval. My goodness, can't we just be left alone to enjoy life? Oh yeah, we have to be courageous. If we must, how do we even communicate with these Vulcan brats, beings? Steiner does tell us that with the development of spiritual science and its practices, communication will come naturally, and it must come, and soon. Did you do your Rose Cross meditation today? Yes, Michael sees all of this. He has confidence in us. Not one of the other archangels are as confident in us as is Michael. Recall that his season is the autumn, a season of the will. Not only the harvest happens in the autumn, but so do wars and popular sports. Lethargy from summer's heat has come to an end. Now in the autumn comes the riddle of the Sphinx, which is, what goes in the morning on 4 legs, 2 at midday, and 3 in the evening? Oedipus guessed the answer, mankind. What does this riddle mean? Michael foresees that we have entered the evening or the autumn of our evolution. We reached our physical peak during the Greek-Roman post-Atlantean cultural age. Michael sees that the Earth too is in its autumn, reaching its evolutionary peak during the middle of the Atlantean epoch. We are in the second half of Earth evolution, in its decline. In one lecture, Steiner called it involution, a sort of preparation to make our seed for Jupiter, the next planetary condition. What does this mean? It means that the Earth is decaying. Even matter is decaying. And humanity's physical existence is also in decline. Our physical bodies will be withering. In fact, they already have begun so. By the year 5700, sexual procreation will come to an end. Oh my, how will things continue? Steiner gave the answer in the lecture, The Fall of the Spirits of Darkness, but it is a grim picture. He said that from 5700, actually quite a bit before that, until the War of All Against All, or roughly the year 8000, humanity will need to rely on these fallen angels, these laggard angels who were pushed down into our consciousness, as well as relying on the help of these Vulcan beings. So we need to find ways to build bodies in the future so that we can still be present on Earth. Even the elemental beings of birth and death, Steiner points out, will be assisting us and guiding us towards technology and commerce. But all of this will lead to our destruction. And Steiner calls it our necessary physical destruction. Some will say, oh, never mind, it's okay, because by then we'll procreate through the larynx. Michael rolls his eyes. What kind of moral state must the human attain in order to be endowed with such an ability? Such a godly skill will not be ours until the second half of the Venus planetary condition. Before then, we will need to perfect our ability to call forth the animal, and before that, the plant. Our morality and will must become fully aligned with God's before such a talent is bestowed upon us. Michael sees all of this. And he sees how from the Philadelphia post-Atlantean cultural age, that is the 6th Paka, a small group of individuals from all around the world will carry human life and culture over to the 6th epoch. During the time before the War of All Against All, human beings will find their way into an existence where their lowest bodily member is no longer the physical, but their etheric. Let me repeat that in different words. By 5700, many people will have a relationship to their physical that can be compared to your current relationship to your automobile. Such people will have their etheric body as their lowest member. Who is leading the way? Christ in the etheric. And that is the direction where Michael points. Remember that Ahrimanic double who joins us in our physical body just before birth and leaves just before death? What will happen to it when we no longer go through birth. Mikhail foresees this too. The double will claim victory by winning for itself the physical realm. As they claim victory, we will retreat to the etheric, where our evolution will continue. The double, however, will not be able to sustain an upright physical body. The second fall, as Steiner calls it, will occur. As we fell from Eden, the double will fall. A new body will emerge for these Ahrimanic beings. It will look like a spider, but its life forces will be at most halfway between the mineral and the plant kingdoms. We, from that point on, will evolve separately. Most of us, that is, because a portion of humanity who cannot overcome materialism will, out of their own free will, elect to go with these spidery beings into what is called the eighth sphere. This raises so many riddles. For example, can any of these humans be saved that fall with the spiders? What is our future with our Ahrimanic double? After all, we will have been with our double for some 26,000 years, at least while we were alive. What are we to learn or gain from our dealings with our double and with Ahriman in particular? Who will be on the human stage of Jupiter? What role will we humans have in preparing the body of these Jupiter humans? If you follow the path of evolution from old sun and its warmth to old sun, to old moon, to earth, you see a continual densification. Will conditions on Jupiter be even more dense? As their angels, will a time come on Jupiter when we will need to be able to incarnate into their bodies to help guide them as our angels did for us earlier in Earth evolution? Does this require us to know about sub-nature? If yes, then these words of Steiner from his last letter ring loudly in our age. And here are his words, quote, "As yet, in the course hitherto taken by the technical age, man has not found the way to readjust his human relation rightly to this new civilization of Ahriman. Man must find," and there are three things here, "the strength, the inner faculty of knowledge, and the discernment for this human being not to be overwhelmed by Ahriman in the civilization of technics. Subnature must be understood in this, its character of undernature. It will only be so understood if mankind rises at least as high in spiritual knowledge of that supernature which lies outside the earthly sphere, as he descends in technical science below it into subnature. This implies not just an ascent, it implies going in both directions, a broadening of human consciousness. Steiner calls it spiritual cowardice, as you heard, to avoid this. Later in this last lecture, he confirms that this is a broadening. And here's his quote: "This makes it necessary for mankind in living inner experience to come to a spiritual knowledge in which he rises as high above into supernature as he goes down below nature with his subnature technical occupations. He thereby creates within him the power not to go under." Mikhail foresees all this. His gaze is not accusatory, but positive and active. His cosmic iron sword points to our way forward. Mikhail is a spirit filled with strength, and he can only make use of thoroughly brave humans, humans full of inner courage. Cosmic warmth, building now in the consciousness soul, must be breathed out by all of us into our observation of the external world. As we do so, we will be building what will become the bodies of the future Jupiter beings. Not only must we understand the world objectively in the manner of spiritual scientists, but we must enter into this understanding with our life of feeling to wrest the world from Ahriman's clutches, filling it with the Christ forces working from within ourselves. Cleverness, this is another quote, sorry, cleverness has been furnished to us in abundance by the last few centuries, but what we need today is warmth of soul, gemut. What everyone must find in his gemut is the match wherewith to light the fire for anthroposophy. Anthroposophy is in truth warm and ardent. He who finds this anthroposophy cold and intellectual and matter of fact just lacks the means of kindling it so it may pervade him with its fire. And just as only a little match is needed to ignite a bonfire, so anthroposophy too needs only a little match. But this will enkindle the forces of Mikhail in mankind. And that's from Karmic Relationships, Volume 3. One might ask, are the fires of the West, your fires out there in the Western region, trying to tell us something about our times and the call for our inner fire? We are the special forces of Mikhail, but Ahriman will be victorious in what he wanted, the physical realm. His minions, the Ahrimanic double, will take over the physical body, just as we rise up to where our etheric body will henceforth be the lowest member of our constitution. And as these doubles gleefully take on the physical body, so there will be, as I said, the second fall. The exousiae gave upright form to our body. The Ahrimanic double has no such moral spine for uprightness. They will become these spidery beings that Steiner talks about, covering the corpse of the earth. We too, though, will be victorious, for we shall wrest from Ahriman what we'll need for our future as co-creators. By going so low into the subphysical, we will rise higher than originally expected. From the gaze of Mikhail, we too can see this future for which we need now to prepare. As our past has been mysteries of thinking, so our future will be mysteries of willing. Those who graduate from this school will have come to the point of being able to co-create the next planetary condition called Jupiter. So I'm going to close with a verse, short one, that goes, Spirit triumphant, flame through the impotence of faltering, faint-hearted souls. Burn up egoism, kindle compassion, so that selflessness, the life stream of humanity, may flow as the wellspring of spiritual rebirth. So I thank you for your attention, and I'll turn it over to Sandra for your questions, if any.
Okay, here's the first one. If Ahriman will take over the physical, what does this mean for the phantom, the essential archetype of the physical body that was redeemed through Christ?
Wonderful question. So the phantom has its evolutionary history going all the way back to Saturn. And so the phantom, we do not lose that. We just lose what we can say is the mineral kingdom aspect of the physical body. But that phantom, which is the archetype of the physical body, will continue with us as we will need it when we develop what is called Atman far in the future.
Okay. We have another question here. Please repeat 3 aspects of Jupiter beings: strength, inner faculty of discernment, and question mark.
So they were strength, the inner faculty of knowledge, and discernment, judgment.
Okay, I'm a little confused on what our proper role attitude towards the Vulcans should be and where they reside now. How do they manifest, act in our current world?
Yeah, so just as these laggard angels were pushed down into our consciousness as a kind of balance to that, they are in our consciousness today. It's fascinating when you ask, what is the role of art in our times? And Steiner describes how art, well, I should put it this way, how science needs to see its phenomenon through the eyes of an artist. That science and art in the olden days were one. Science, art, and religion. These must become one again. The Vulcans, if you look historically, Vulcan is the Latin word for Hephaestus, the Greek word, who is the god of technology. And if you look at this mythology of Hephaestus, it's very interesting. He is the son of Zeus and Hera. But when Hera brings him forth, she holds him up and looks at him and goes, yuck, because she sees he's got a malformed foot. He's the first god who's not beautiful throughout. He has this malformed foot. She's so disgusted, she throws him off of Olympus. And he has to grow up on the earth. And so where he grows up is near a volcano. He learns about not only, he learns about the fire in the earth. So he brings spiritual fire, and he then can understand the fire in the earth. Humanity's future is spoken of here. We have in this story how Prometheus gets this fire and brings it to humanity, the fire coming from Hephaestus. It is our destiny in the future to develop the inner fire we have to be one with the outer fire. We will need to do that to become the cosmic janitors. When Earth evolution is over, we have a big mess to clean up. We have to use that fire to melt away all this physicalness. But that inner fire and that external fire are parts of what you can also call the Cain stream, the stream of Hiram Abiff, and all of those mysteries. It is a difficult path, a path that takes us down to know about sub-nature, but it is then this path that can help us in the future to be these co-creators of those who will take the human stage of Jupiter. I hope I've answered that enough, but if you look also at this mythology of Hephaestus, there's something fascinating when the gods invite him to return to Olympus. He does so on the back of a donkey. And of course, when Jesus Christ enters Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, he recapitulates that.
Okay, we have another one. What implications does this have for instance, biodynamics and the ecological movement that aspire to understand the sanctity of nature?
So understand the sanctity of
Nature.
nature. Okay, I thought you said Nietzsche.
No,
Nature.
nature.
Yeah, right. So one might end up hearing what I said, thinking that, oh, why do we care anymore? To hell with the earth. And it would be like saying, why do I care about my parents or my grandparents? They're going to die anyway. My parents are now 50 years old. Who cares about them anymore? And yet, biodynamics has an essential role. Not only is it helping the earth to maintain its vitality and live out its life in its fullness, because the earth is a living being, and we don't want the earth to die too soon. And also, we don't want the earth to die too late. It has a right age to die. But also, Steiner talked about the reason why we aren't seeing so many human beings able to use the practices to develop themselves to experience the spiritual world. He said it's a question of nutrition as well. And so we need the biodynamics in order to help bring about the spiritual scientists who can enter into Ahriman's realm. So it acts as that leavening or that balance that is so needed. You know, the ecological or environmental movement can be said of something similar, but much of it sees it in a very materialistic sense. Our environmental movement needs to see the earth as a living being. We have to see what is going on. Is the earth warming because it's becoming ill, like a human being who develops a temperature when it's ill?
Okay, we have another. It says, thank you for the fascinating talk. What do we need to descend consciously into subnature in order to rise also?
So you don't want to descend into subnature without this balance. The question really is, does each individual need this balance, or can humanity balance other parts of humanity? And I think the answer lies in both, in that if you go into subnature without spiritual science, you will become ill from that. Likewise, if you go into spiritual nature, supernature, without bringing some of this along, you will be left to go your own way without the rest of mankind. You will be abandoned, in a sense, by humanity. And so this balance has to be maintained not only across humanity, but by individuals as well. But yes, certain individuals, because of forces they bring to life through their karmic past and so on, can go much deeper into subnature than other human beings without seeing the physical illnesses that will come about. But we're going to see more and more physical illnesses, new ones that we don't know about. And so not only is there to be a mechanical occultism, but there needs to be two other occultisms, a hygienic for this healing, which is supposed to arise through what Steiner calls the middle of the earth, which would be Europe, perhaps some of the Middle East and Africa. And then from Russia, India, and China should arise a eugenic occultism. Now, the word eugenic has a very bad connotation today. So we might call it the mysteries of bringing forces to conception. So a more knowledgeable conception. But then conception is going to end as we know it. So what becomes of eugenics in the future? And this remains a mystery. And I don't think we are allowed to know it. There's some things I should say about mechanical occultism. Many people know about Paul Emerson's wonderful work, and he did a magnificent job. But he coined a term, moral technology, which Steiner did not use, and it's brought about something which I think some people have developed a misunderstanding of the first stages of mechanical occultism. And so that is to say that there will be in the future, when this separation of the physical and etheric occur, and the physical is now seen like an automobile, it has that relationship to the etheric, then we will be able to develop an etheric technology. In the meantime, Steiner clearly talks about how machines operating with electromagnetic forces will operate based on this mechanical occultism by vibrations coming from the human being. And we already see the beginnings of this in prosthetic limbs that supposedly work by your mind making commands to the arm, for example. And you can see on YouTube and elsewhere lots of videos showing a person with a prosthetic limb being able to reach out with that limb, grab a cup and bring it up to their mouth and drink from it. And these are incredible achievements. And they are working on vibrations. So, and this is what Steiner said will come about in the future. It begs a question, though. We already have heart pacers, we have hearing aids, we have many mechanical parts in our joints as we get older. As our bodies wither, we have had no problem putting in mechanical replacements to our body. Fast forward 500 years from now, will we, no problem, replace our withered arms with prosthetic arms, or our withered legs with prosthetic legs? What else in our body will we replace with mechanical? And I think our Ahrimanic double is urging us, celebrating such things, because for them, the less blood in the body, the better. It wants everything to be a system of nerve system. And I mentioned the archangels are now needed there. Archangels like Michael in our nerve system, where these Ahrimanic beings are trying to enter.
Okay, you ready for another?
Sure.
Can you say something about transhumanism, merging of man and machine?
Sure, I can. And I'll start out by saying a quote from Steiner is that the welding together of man and machine will be an ongoing problem for the rest of our physical evolution. Steiner can be said to be a forerunner of transhumanism, but transhumanism has taken the tact of materialism rules. A transhumanist welcomes this merging with the cyborg. It even believes that our consciousness arises by software in our biological computer, our brain. And that is so far from where Steiner is, but it's so fascinating that there are many things that sound the same in transhumanism and things that Steiner wrote, that a person might mistake Steiner for a sort of forerunner of transhumanism. I liken it to the difference between light, as Steiner would call it, light, etheric light, and light that we get from an electric light bulb. And as many of you probably know, scientists today, their studies on light are done with monochromatic lasers.
Okay, here we go. You speak a lot of the Vulcan beings. Does Rudolf Steiner also call them by another term? I don't see much use of this term in Steiner's later works.
Steiner does refer to spiritual beings, beings that are close to humans. He also refers to moon beings. The question, though, he uses the word Vulcan beings in at least 3 different lecture cycles that I know of. So you can do some searching afterwards. I might just comment that often he will mention our relationship to moon beings, because during Lemuria, of course, the beings who are now with the moon were with us before the moon left. At this time that the moon left, the Vulcan beings were being evicted, so to speak, from the sun evolution. In a geocentric model, the Vulcan sphere and the moon sphere essentially coincide. In the heliocentric model, the Vulcan sphere would be just outside of the esoteric Mercury sphere, or in today's astronomy, we would say the Venus sphere. But yeah, he does not talk about Vulcans more than 3 or 4 different times. But in those 3 or 4, he makes it very clear how important they are for our evolution as well as theirs, and what will happen if we don't work with them.
Okay, our acupuncturist uses machines made in Germany to reinforce natural EM signals that have become too weak to reinforce with traditional acupuncture alone. I guess they're making a comment.
I will answer right away. The EM is electromagnetic. We like to think that our nerves are like a wire, that electromagnetic signals travel up and down. when you get to your second level of human anatomy and all, you learn that it actually isn't anything like a wire because there's stop and start points, different aspects to a nerve cell that goes from electrical to chemical back to electrical, and also it's something else that's going on there. But I don't know enough about acupuncture and these machines to be able to comment on that. But I will say that when we were descending from Eden to earth, and these spiritual beings were bringing in these Ahrimanic beings and working with them and deciding what to do and all, these Ahrimanic beings, our double that came up to meet us and help form this physical body, it is through them that this nerve system, the electricity in it was brought in. So it's through that Ahrimanic double that we do have this inner electricity.
Okay. What is the role of elemental natural beings?
So the elemental natural beings are the offspring, as it were, of angels, archangels, and archai to do the work in nature that these beings, because they are spiritual beings, cannot do. So they have been created in this sense by, shall we call it, the thinking and willing of these beings. Likewise, human beings have been given this capability to create elemental beings that will inhabit our technology. These are lower than nature beings. These are below nature. But they are elemental beings nonetheless. And there's lots of other classes of elemental beings that have to do with the rotation of the earth or of birth and death, things that the higher spirits of the hierarchies cannot do because these involve physical things. So so that's enough.
Okay. Do you think events like this one we're having tonight can help stretch consciousness in the two directions by using technology to discuss spiritual matters?
By using technology to discuss spiritual matters?
Like having this Zoom meeting tonight.
Right. I mean, it's very interesting, is it not, that this technology we're using came about only 4 years before COVID struck. How would we have carried on with the schools? How would we have carried on this that we're doing tonight? Is it not interesting that we're using technology to overcome the spatial barriers that existed before? We haven't quite overcome the time, but we're getting closer to that. We have some sort of pseudo overcoming time by sending messages. You don't have to have the conversation going on in the same simultaneously, but it can be spread out over time, a conversation. But here we're gathered, and are we touching soul to soul? Is there something about our higher beings that operate without spatial distancing, not caring about that? So it's then a question of our attention. And does our attention reach another person through this medium we're using? And I will make the analogy to the telephone, which for the last, I don't know what, 100 years, we've had telephone calls. And I remember seeing people crying on the phone, having conversations with their dear one who's far away. And, you know, they feel that they had this soul to soul interaction. But those voices were digitized. When you're talking on the phone, and my voice right now is being digitized and going over the internet. So Sergei Prokofiev wrote about 20 years ago an article called "The Being of the Internet," and in it he described various things in a very sort of fearful way about what the internet can do to our sense of humanity, and that in it, Ahriman is working. And in a sense, all of this is true. And in a sense, older people are not as well equipped to work in Ahriman's realm as those who are incarnating today, and those of you who are in your 20s or 30s. You're much better equipped. The analogy is in 1837, a group of scientists and doctors were asked about whether or not a train line should be built between these two cities. And the doctors came to the conclusion that it shouldn't be built. And if it was built, high walls should be built on either side of the railroad tracks, because it would be injurious, especially to the nervous system of those living along the tracks. And Steiner said, we look back upon that and ridicule it, because the railroad people went ahead and built it anyway, and then said, see, it's not bothering anyone. But Steiner pointed out it actually did affect those people. But the next generation and the next generation after that could deal with it better, because as they were preparing to come to Earth, they knew what they were coming into. And so they prepared differently than an older person like myself prepared coming into the Earth environment. As I was descending, I could see all the people coming, excarnating due to World War II. And I'm sure that was a dreadful sight to see all the suffering. So similarly, people who are incarnating today are seeing all of the dreadfulness of artificial intelligence. And we can throw 5G into this question, for example. Nobody's done the testing on living things. Why can't they take a beehive and put it under a 5G mast and observe what happens? Or remember when you were in, I don't know, 5th grade or something, you got an ant farm and you could see all the ants, you know, because it was thin in glass. Why don't we stick one of those under a 5G mast and see what happens? You know, do the ants want to leave? You know, we don't know the answers to that. But I know the people in the industry, because I was in it, are saying, what's the big deal? Because 5G is actually safer. It doesn't go through walls like 4G does. It's safer in this sense. When it touches your skin, it bounces away. It doesn't penetrate your body like 4G. Why didn't you scream bloody murder back in 4G times? What about 5G? And it's fascinating to read what Steiner had to say about wireless technology. And again, he says, we can't rail against this stuff. It has to happen. And then in another lecture, he says, the spiritualization of the earth that we have to do in the future will be developed out of wireless technology. We will need this wireless technology for our future and what we will need to do to spiritualize the matter deep in the earth. That's a fascinating thought. And so it's a double-bladed sword, all of these inventions. It cuts both ways. Another question?
Okay, we're going to take two more, and then we need to wrap up for the
Yeah,
evening before you go to sleep. On You're right. This one is: where does this leave Sophia, who has been imprisoned in the corner of the sky, having been stripped of color? Will we be able to save her? And she's also, this is Patricia Finkel saying, it's nice to be with you again.
So the goddess of wisdom has this relationship, of course, to the cosmic intelligence that has been let go of by Mikhail. We are those beings who will decide that future. And this mechanical occultism can be brought about in multiple, well, let's say two ways, a good way and an evil way. Steiner describes, and I'll come to Sophia, you'll see, that there is a way through the forces of Sagittarius on one side and Gemini, thank you, that those forces will be used to create these mechanical beasts, was the word Steiner used, that will do harm to human evolution. And in particular, one of these will emulate the vibrations from a cow's digestive system. As you know, the cow is the sacred animal of digestion. And they will find a way to mechanize it. And that vibration will, in all these vibrations that come from the mechanical occultism, are going to sound out from the earth into the cosmos. And the cosmos is required by higher beings, the cherubim, to bring about harmony. And so they will try to harmonize with these. We will be mechanizing, on the one hand, the movement of the planets and the movement, of the stars. As Ahriman tries to reach that far through us. But through the good mechanical occultism, it will create a balancing vibration. And we will be able to, through that, redeem this cosmic intelligence. And in so doing, bring our consciousness to Sophia again. But we will have to bear up that intelligence to her.
Okay, one last question. What would you suggest we take up in order to best prepare ourselves to best serve Mikhail's needs and to facilitate our ability to adequately enter the sub-realms and retrieve intelligence?
So the simple answer to that is spiritual science. The second answer is spiritual science, and so is the third. How to get there? 6 basic exercises. Gee, I must be needing sleep right now. Rose cross meditation, warmth meditation, the seed meditation, all of these things. The first class, of course. And it seems to me that the second class and the third class were, in a sense, necessary also for this. But I think human beings are able, through this work and this meditation, to come to the point that we can have a good imagination what these beings want and need from us. So the lecture cycle, I say that because of the lecture cycle, the work of the angels in man's astral body. And in a way, we don't have to be asleep. But it helps, I think, when we practice meditation, that these Vulcan beings can instill in us imaginations. That then there will be moments where that imagination arises. Moments of where we don't know what to do. We're kind of lost and we're seeking a kind of picture, an inspiration or something. And in that moment, then that imagination picture might arise. But that'll happen more easily when you are, as Steiner put it, a serious spiritual scientist. Do you want to read the verse that you started us out with, Sandra?
Right. Technology and art, their bearing on modern culture. Everybody is obliged to undergo the battle. In its effects, it is experienced by everybody. There would be no greater fallacy than to say we must rebel against what technical science has brought to us in modern life. We must protect ourselves from Ahriman. We must withdraw from this modern life. In a certain respect, such an attitude would be an indication of spiritual cowardice. The real remedy lies not in allowing the forces of the soul to weaken and to withdraw from modern life, but in so strengthening these forces that its pandemonium can be endured. World karma demands a courageous attitude to modern life. And that is why genuine spiritual science calls at the very outset for effort, really strenuous effort on the part of the human soul.